The top is very steep, it's not skiable, and it's very rocky as you can see, so you have to down climb into it. This is actually the most mellow part of the down climb. Hi, my name is Betsy Manero. I'm a ski guide and avalanche instructor for the mountain guides out of Jackson Hole. I've been working in the Teton since 2015. I started guiding in Vermont a little bit before that in around 2012. I also work as the associate editor of Backcountry magazine. And yeah, I started backcountry skiing when I was like 11 years old with my dad in the White Mountains and have just loved it ever since.
My name is Rebecca Yaguda. Lots of people do call me Gouda, so whatever you prefer. I am originally from the East Coast, similar to Betsy, and I grew up ski racing in New Jersey and in Vermont, so I was really good at skiing on ice, but not so much powder. I moved out west a little over 10 years ago, which is where I discovered powder skiing, and I've never looked back. I started working in outdoor education for an organization called Knowles, and I've been with them for 10 plus years. And through Knowles, I discovered the world of guiding, and I started guiding in the rock, alpine, and ski disciplines. I also teach avalanche courses, mostly through the mountain guides. And I feel really lucky to be able to say that I work for the mountain guides year round. So in the summer, I'm guiding rock and alpine in the Tetons, and in the winter, I ski guide and I teach avalanche courses. So that's just a little bit about me.
So we're going to be going over a handful of topics during this webinar. To start, I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of backcountry skiing, and then we'll talk about why we love skiing in the Tetons and why Rebecca and I have both decided to make this our home range. We're also going to we're going to tell the story of a day that we went and skied a line in Grand Teton National Park called Turkey Shoot a couple of years ago. And then from there, we'll talk about how to find awesome runs and to make a safe trip plan for your day. We're also going to touch on a little bit of backcountry skiing etiquette and the current state of backcountry skiing before we get into what our deep POW camp will look like, and then we'll do the Q&A. So I'm going to start with just a little bit of the history of skiing in the Tetons. This range has a super deep history, and I'm just going to go over it very briefly. To start, this is just a photo of skiing on Teton Pass on a line called Telemark Bowl. I believe this photo is from like the mid-1900s. All of those little dots in the bowl, they're not trees, they're people out to ski. It's a super popular place to go. And then just some quick history. Teton Pass, it's a super popular area to ski on. It's the road that connects Teton Valley, Idaho on the west side of the Tetons to the other side of the range. On the east side is where Jackson Hole sits. And that road actually has a ton of skiing on it. In the 1930s, backcountry skiing kind of started there when a teenager named Fred Brown started delivering the mail in the winter. There's still an area called Mail Cabin, which is a reminder of when Fred was delivering the mail over the pass. And then in 1933, this guide, Paul Petzel, came to Jackson and spent his first winter there and met Fred Brown, and they started skiing together, and they really had like the spark of backcountry skiing in the Tetons. Fast forward a little bit to 1971, and that is when this guy, Bill Briggs, made the first ascent of the Grand Teton. For those not as familiar with the range, the Grand Teton is the highest peak in the range. It tops out at 13,775 feet. And to ski it, it's a mix of mountaineering and skiing. So you're bringing ropes and ice climbing gear and doing rappels and being on belay on it. So it's quite a feat. Bill Briggs was the first one to ski it. He made the first ascent with 2 fused hips, wearing leather boots on telemark skis. So it was pretty impressive. In 2007, 2 of our Jackson Hole Mountain guides, Julia Niles and Lisa Van Sciver, made the first all-female descent of the Grand Teton. And then in 2014, a local woman named Sasha Johnstone, when she was 15 years old, became the youngest woman to ski the Grand Teton.
So I want to talk a little bit about why Betsy and I love the Tetons and why so many people love the Tetons. But first, before I go into the ski specific information. I'm going to talk about the range in general. We get a ton of tourists from all over the world who love to visit us here for a couple reasons. One is the national parks. We have Grand Teton National Park, which is just outside of Jackson Hole, Wyoming. We also have Yellowstone National Park, which is a little bit further north. Also, on any given day, when you're driving through Jackson, you might see elk, bears, moose, bison. The wildlife is really amazing. And then for skiers, we have Jackson Hole Mountain Resort, which is a pretty expansive inbounds ski resort with amazing snow. So people come from all over the world to ski at Jackson Hole Mountain Resort. But apart from those things, the backcountry is kind of what keeps Betsy and I here. We both live in the Teton Valley, Idaho, so just on the other side of Teton Pass. And we have access to the backcountry, which is, I think, what keeps us here year round. So one of the things that we love so much is the landscape. And you can see in this photo, that's actually a picture of the Grand Teton that Betsy was just talking about. The valley floor is at around 6,500 feet elevation, and the Grand Teton, like Betsy mentioned, is a little bit over 13,700 feet. So that vertical gain is incredible. And to be able to see that every day is really special. You can see here that there are a ton of fresh tracks on this slope. I think one really special thing about this area is it's pretty easy to find fresh snow any day of the week, any day in the winter. Even if the parking lots are pretty full and busy, if you're willing to go for a bit of a walk, you can find fresh snow almost guaranteed. Just to talk a little bit about the ski terrain, there is a variety of ski terrain for almost any type of skier. So if you're a beginner or an intermediate and you're just getting a feel for being on skis or a snowboard for that matter, you can find terrain that you're really going to enjoy. And in addition to that, you can also find some pretty steep terrain pretty quickly. And it's amazing to me how easy the access can be to these steeper lines. They do have higher consequences, but once you gain those skills and you work towards it, the Tetons has so much to offer in terms of steep terrain with amazing snow. And as you build those skills more and more, you'll be able to get to places where you'll see few people. So this is me doing a little bit of rock scrambling in the winter with my skis attached to my backpack. And this allowed me to get to some ski terrain that not many other people were able to get to. Of course, this took me years of both rock climbing experience, alpine experience, and skiing to be able to do those types of endeavors. But if you put in the work, you can do it too. And I think a really cool thing about this photo too is in the background is Jackson Hole, Wyoming. So you can see how amazing those views are. If you're willing to go for a bit of a longer walk, you can get to some pretty unique terrain. So this photo was taken at around 11,000 feet elevation. And it's right near the lower saddle of the Grand Teton. And if you're willing to get up to those elevations and that far away from the road, it's pretty likely that you won't see any people and you can ski some pretty cool stuff. So this is a view from the top of Jackson Hole Mountain Resort and looking into the backcountry that is accessible from the resort. And I want to talk about this idea of side country for a second. I think there's idea that once you leave the gates of an inbound ski resort, you're in the quote side country. But I do want it to be clear that once you leave the gates, you are truly in the backcountry. So I try to get away from using the term side country because it kind of brings this air of like, oh, I'm still safe because I'm close enough to the ski resort. However, once you do leave the gates, you're dealing with the same risks that you would if you were truly in the backcountry. You can see from this photo that there is incredible terrain available from the gates of Jackson Hole Mountain Resort. And if you do choose to go, we highly recommend hiring a guide, taking an avalanche course, and just overall being prepared for those risks with all of the necessary safety equipment. So this is me skiing on Teton Pass, and the snow was really incredible that day. And that's something that we love about the Tetons too. We get this amazingly light snow. It's also really quiet in the backcountry, and it really brings a little bit of serenity to my life. I love backcountry skiing for the refuge it brings me from the chaos that everyday life can sometimes have. And I think that this really captures that feeling. So although it does snow a lot in the Tetons, we do get a ton of bluebird sunny days too. And this was one of those, just spectacular and amazing way to spend your day outside. So one really amazing thing about the area where Betsy and I live is we're in this intermountain zone, or we have an intermountain snowpack, which essentially means we are between a continental zone, which is dry and cold and doesn't get quite as much snow, and between the Pacific zone or maritime climate that gets a ton of snow, but it can often be heavy and wet. We kind of have this perfect mix of the two, where we get a bit more snow, but it's still light. So this is me skiing some of that snow. So this is a ski run off of Teton Pass called Mount Glory. It's a 1,500 foot ski descent right from the road. So if you're in fairly good shape, you can do this car to car in just under 2 hours. This is me actually skiing Mount Glory one day before work. I think it's the most beautiful pre-work workout in the world, and it totally beats the treadmill. This is Betsy skiing in the northern part of Grand Teton National Park on the backside of Mount Moran. And so the park is pretty large and has a huge variety of terrain. And this shows you just how expansive that terrain can be. This is me skiing on April 13th of 2018, right? So in the rest of the world, when flowers are blooming and the sun is coming out, we will often still have powder days. Now, there are some pros and cons to this. If you live here in the Tetons, you have to really love winter. Winter can often last from early November through April and sometimes even into May. The pro of this is, if you do love winter or you're just visiting, you have a very high likelihood of having powder days like this any day in any of those months. This is me skiing a pretty popular run in Grand Teton National Park called Shadow Peak. It is a beautiful ski run with a long descent. And I think the cool thing about this ski run is in the upper left-hand corner, that's actually the Grand Teton. So it's not too far away. Just the views are incredible. So I wanted to give you all a little bit of a better idea of kind of the overview of the Tetons area. I think a lot of folks know the Tetons just for Jackson Hole, the town, Jackson Hole Mountain Resort, and Grand Teton National Park. But there's so much more to this area than just those zones. So I'm going to kind of show you where they all are in relation to each other. So on the far left side of this map is the Big Hole mountain range, and that range is just west of Teton Valley, Idaho. Moving south is in the green zone is the Palisades. And a large part of the Palisades is actually a wilderness study area. So not quite designated wilderness yet, but is being considered for that. So the wildlife you can see in there is amazing. A lot of it is still accessible for snowmobiles. And if you do choose to backcountry ski in that zone, you're unlikely to see many other people. Just north of that in the little red zone is Teton Pass. So that's Betsy and I have talked about Teton Pass a little bit already, but it's the road that connects Jackson Hole, Wyoming to Teton Valley, Idaho. And there's a ton of amazing skiing with pretty easy access. And then even further south in the yellow zone is the Wyoming range. And not a ton of people go backcountry skiing there, but there is some really fun terrain and really excellent snowmobile access as well. In the large blue area is the Grovant mountain range, which is just to the east of Jackson Hole, Wyoming, which you can see I marked Jackson Hole with the little red X. And the Grovant is amazing because it is very large and not many people go back there. So you may have to go for a longer walk to get some backcountry skiing in there, but if you're willing to do so, you'll for sure get some good skiing. And then all the way in the northern part of this map, the large purple area is Grand Teton National Park. And just below that, just south of that, the tiny little pink blob, that's Jackson Hole Mountain Resort. So as large as the resort is, you can see how tiny it is compared to all these backcountry areas. So I just wanted to show you all that map just to give you an idea of our zone. And just for you all to know, if you think outside the box a little bit, you can get to some backcountry skiing that not many people have done before. So I think that's pretty cool.
Cool. And so now I'm going to talk about skiing Grand Teton National Park, specifically a day that Rebecca and I went and skied a run called Turkey Shoot. And so this is a Google Maps image of Turkey Shoot. It's the red dotted line approximately. It's off a peak called 25 Short. The peak's called that because it's 25 feet short of 10,000 feet. It's a little sub peak on this ridge that you can see right here. And it's a couloir. A couloir, for those of you who don't know, it's a generally pretty thin line that's walled on either side. So you can ski the snow in between rock walls. Sometimes there's steep trees on either side. Sometimes it's just very steep terrain that's not skiable. They're also called chutes. And Turkey Shoot is oftentimes people's first couloir in Grand Teton National Park. But that being said, it's definitely not an easy feat to go ski it. It takes quite a bit of training and years of experience. This is also something for the deep POW camp that with a more advanced group, we might ski on day 2. So the first hard part about Turkey Shoot is just getting there. Right here in this photo, this is the summit of 25 Short, the Turkey Shoot is just off of. These people are almost to the top of Turkey Shoot. This was a much sunnier day than when Rebecca and I went and skied it. So to skin to Turkey Shoot, it's about 3,500 vertical feet over 4 miles of skinning. So it's a pretty big day. There's quite a bit of fitness. The average group's probably going to take 4 to 4.5 hours just to get to the top of it. And then from there, you get to the next challenge, which this is actually the day that Rebecca and I went and skied it. This is Rebecca down climbing into Turkey Shoot. The top is very steep. It's not skiable and it's very rocky, as you can see. So you have to down climb into it. This is actually the most mellow part of the down climb. It was the spot that I could stop and actually pull my phone out to take a picture. If we're guiding this, we'll oftentimes put clients on a rope because it can be pretty scary and pretty tough. And now you're actually at the top of the skiing. This is, again, a different day, a much sunnier day than when Rebecca and I did this. This is actually one of our coworkers, Chris Brown. He's standing on top of the skiing section. And as you can see, it's super steep. The top of Turkey Shoot is about 45 degrees. So you really have to be able to make quick hop turns to get down this and be comfortable with steep skiing. When you're skiing 45 degree slopes, if you're just standing kind of sideways across the slope, you can usually reach out with your hand and touch the back of the slope behind you. So it's pretty steep. We also tend to naturally lean into steep stuff like that because they're really scary. Yeah. And then it does mellow out a little bit lower down, but you do have to ski the steep part to get there. So this is me on the day that Rebecca and I went and skied it. Rebecca, as you can see, is kind of off to the side under this rock band down here. And the reason that she's standing there is because couloir skiing can be kind of dangerous in the way that you can knock down snow, you can knock down rocks. If you fall, you might fall down the couloir. So it's really important that your ski partner isn't standing right under you. So when Rebecca was taking this photo of me, she was standing in what we call like an island of safety. So this section, this rocky section right up here was protecting her from anything that might fall down the couloir. This again was the day that our friend Chris Brown went and skied it. This is one of our other co-guides, Izzy. She's a split boarder. And one of the coolest things about Turkey Shoot is you're skiing under these huge rock walls. It's just quite the experience to be skiing down and just have these cliff bands on the side of you. It's pretty cool. And then this is where we start exiting the couloir. So this is me getting out of the couloir. We're in the bottom, which is called the apron. And the apron is generally lower angle. It's where everything starts opening up. And it's also where the best snow in the couloir usually is. So now I'm getting to actually make some turns, not just having a hop turn, and actually getting to ski some powder. Here's Rebecca coming out of the apron. As you can see, she's also getting some nice fresh powder turns. And so part of a day of skiing couloir is also trip planning. So Rebecca and I, sat down together the night before. We went and skied Turkey Shoot, and we made a plan. The first thing we planned was our up track. This blue line on the graph shows our up track. One thing about Grand Teton National Park is, as you can see, the first 1.25 miles is pretty flat. So all of the peaks in Grand Teton National Park are actually set back about 1 mile from the road. So it's 1 mile of skinning in to where you actually start to get to go uphill to the skiable terrain. But the really cool thing about that is if you have a clear day, you're looking right at the Tetons for most of it. So you have a pretty incredible view. And then, we gained about 3,500 feet on this descent. It's right up here. And then this was our descent. So the steep part of the red line is when we were in the couloir. That's the steepest part of the ski. And then after that, we had what's called the egress, which is when it starts to mellow out. And then we started to get kind of back into this flatter stuff for the last mile or so to get out of Grand Teton National Park. We also made this map. It's on an app called CalTopo that Rebecca's going to talk about in a couple minutes. And we brought this with us into the field just to make sure we didn't get lost, to make sure we stayed on track. The blue line is our ascent. That's how we went up. The red line is our descent. And Turkey Shoot, the actual couloir, is right over here. As you can see, it's very steep. The darker the color, the steeper it is. So it's very steep around the couloir. You've got all those rock walls. With this, we also had a plan B. So we decided if we got up to the top of Turkey Shoot and we didn't want to ski it, we could just ski back down where our blue line is, just to play it safe. And then the final part of our planning process was looking at the weather and the snowpack. Backcountry skiing, it's not just like skiing at a resort where you can just go into a lodge and there's patrol mitigating avalanches for you. You really have to pay attention to what the weather's doing and what the snow conditions are. So this is our local avalanche report, which was actually, this particular report was for the actual day that we went and skied Turkey Shoot. And we looked at this and decided that based on the danger rating right here, and the weather, that it would be a safe bet to go ski Turkey Shoot. With this, like I said, we also had a plan B just in case we got out into the field and we started seeing things that didn't line up with this weather forecast and avalanche report, just to make sure that we weren't totally pigeonholed into skiing that one steep run.
So when I teach avalanche courses or when I take people out ski guiding, pretty much the number one question that I'm asked is, well, how do I find ski runs for myself? How can I just like go and choose a place to ski safely? I think that is the hardest part about getting started with backcountry skiing, especially if you don't have a mentor right away. The first most obvious, I think, resource is a guidebook. There are often guidebooks for a bunch of different areas in the country and probably around the world that list popular backcountry ski runs. This book is a really awesome one for our area, Teton Pass Backcountry Guide by Tom Turiano, a local legend. This book essentially will tell you the ins and outs of these popular ski runs, what you need to know about them, their location, and often will include a map of the area so that you can pretty easily find it. So guidebooks are definitely a resource worth looking out for. Another really excellent resource are paper maps. And often paper maps for local areas will have trails marked on them. These are resources that you can often find at local ski shops. So for instance, in our area, Teton Mountaineering in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, or Yostmark in Driggs, Idaho. Those are Betsy and my favorite ski shops, and those would definitely have some of these resources. This website is called FatMap. For those of you who have never used it, it's essentially Google Earth. The difference being that it shows you what areas hold snow. So it's pretty easy to go to FatMap, look at a 3D view, and you can also spin the picture around so that you can see any run that you want to look at. And you can see, okay, does it hold snow? Is it just totally rocky? What does it look like? Will it be fun skiing? This is a really awesome tool for finding runs that are kind of off the beaten path or not super popular. And so sometimes you can see other trails that the public have marked in FatMap. CalTopo is awesome because you can look at any topographical map almost anywhere in the world. I prefer this to FatMap for a couple reasons. One is I think it's a little bit more detailed. So it's really easy for me to see, where are there terrain traps? What are the slope angles? What terrain do I want to avoid? For that reason, it makes it a little bit easier for me to trip plan. This was the resource that Betsy and I used to plan our turkey shoot day. I'm going to show you all pretty quickly how I would use a CalTopo map to plan a day out for myself. So this is a zoomed in view of a popular backcountry ski area in Grand Teton National Park called Mavericks. The first thing that I like to do on a topo map, right on CalTopo on the internet, is I'll mark areas that I want to avoid. And I make those decisions based on what the avalanche forecast is telling me that morning. So if the avalanche hazard for that day is high or considerable, I might just want to avoid all avalanche terrain. Whereas if the avalanche danger is more moderate or even low, I might cautiously step out into some avalanche terrain, but I may still want to avoid consequences. So those are some things that you need to decide for yourself based on what the forecast is telling you. So what I marked on this map in red are areas that I want to avoid. And mostly those are cliff bands, very steep zones, and some smaller terrain traps. Those would look like drainages, gullies, places where I don't want to get stuck in the bottom of. The next thing I would do is choose a place where I want to put my skin track. So keep in mind when you are putting in a skin track, you're moving pretty slowly. So you really want to be avoiding avalanche terrain as much as possible since your exposure time is more. And then the final thing that I would do is pick where I want to go skiing, right? And like Betsy said, it's always good to have a plan B. But on this particular map, the pink line is where I decided the best looking skiing is. And The way that I like to pick ski runs is, choosing fall line terrain is always the most fun. Another way of saying that is I don't like traversing a lot when I'm skiing. I like just skiing downhill. I'm also definitely avoiding highly consequential terrain. So those would be cliffy areas. And if I poke out into a little bit of avalanche terrain here and there, that's okay. Of course, depending on the day and the hazards. But yeah, so that's that very quickly how I would use a CalTopo map. And then from there, I would take this map and actually download it to my cell phone so that I have it while I'm traveling in the backcountry. And that brings me to a screenshot of my cell phone. So these are my favorite mapping apps that I like to have on my cell phone. My personal favorites are Gaia, FatMap, and Avenza, for all different reasons. I've already talked about FatMap. Gaia is essentially an app that has topo maps for anywhere in the country. And you don't have to download maps. That's the beauty of it. You'll always have them. And you don't even need cell phone service when you're out there. Via GPS tracking, this app will tell you where you are at any given moment. The reason I like Avenza is a free app. First of all, that's like the biggest benefit. The other great thing about Avenza is you can download that CalTopo map that you created on the internet and store it in your Avenza app on your cell phone. And similar to Gaia, it'll track you using GPS tracking no matter where you are. So you can always make sure when you're on your skin track in real life, it's matching up with the skin track that you marked on your cell phone. And the final tool, and arguably the most important, is the avalanche forecast for your local zone. So this is avalanche.org. It is the website that I use every single morning in the winter to tell me what's going on in my local area. So it'll give you the weather for the last 24 hours, the upcoming weather, the avalanche hazard, and often there are really in-depth discussions of what have people been seeing out there. They will also list avalanche events, right? And so always remember that the way you know that avalanches are possible is if avalanches are happening.
We are going to move on to a little bit about the state of skiing in the Tetons, including some tips on etiquette if you're skiing here, how to get along with everyone that you're skiing around. So to start, I'm just going to talk a little bit about what's going on in the Teton ski scene right now. Nationwide, across the United States since 2014, the number of backcountry users has doubled. This is a statistic from Snow Sports Industry of America, SIA. So there were 3 million people skiing in the backcountry in 2014. As of 2020, there are 6 million. It's just seen an incremental growth every year. And then with the uncertainty of ski resorts and whether or not they're going to open and how they're going to do all of that, it's now up to 6 million. Here in Jackson, we see 2.5 million annual visitors. Not all of them are coming to ski. That is a year-round statistic. Some of them are coming to see the national parks in the summer, but we still have a lot of tourists coming in to ski. And then we also have about 25,000 residents who are skiing regularly. So where we're seeing the strain, the biggest one is parking areas. We don't have huge parking areas here. It's all dictated by the national forest or the national parks. So sometimes it can be really hard to park if you don't get there early enough. Easy access ski zones or popular areas are very crowded these days, especially if you go out the gates at one of the resorts. There's been a huge spike in the demand for avalanche education. It's probably tripled this year at least for the mountain guides. And then it's also harder for us to communicate leave no trace principles and backcountry etiquette just because there are so many people out there. And there's almost like, I guess you could call it a mentorship gap. There aren't enough people to pass on that information. to the number of people coming in.
This is what the parking area on Teton Pass has been looking like this year. And any of the cars that are not parked parallel, those cars are actually waiting for a spot. I've definitely gotten to the top of Teton Pass and waited for about an hour this year. And that's not that common. I think this is the first time that we're really seeing that. And so with that, I'm going to talk a little bit about backcountry etiquette. The first thing I want to say is always, always, always have your safety equipment. It could save your life and it could also save someone else's. So the equipment that we need to bring every single time we go out are beacon, shovel, and probe. When you're parking, try to park parallel to another car and park close to it. Respect the snowplow, right? Like often we'll see snowbanks that have graffiti written on them that say no parking. And there is a reason for that. It's so that snowplows can get in there and keep the roads clear for us. On Teton Pass, there is a pretty big culture of hitchhiking, actually both in the summer and the winter. So in the summer, mountain bikers hitchhike, and in the winter, we'll often ski from the top of Teton Pass down to either towards Idaho or towards Wilson, Wyoming, and then hitchhike back up to the top. And if we choose to do that, let's just make sure to always use pullouts and parking lots, right? We don't want to cause any accidents. And along with that, we are being asked to skin on the side of the road rather than walking on the road for similar reasons. It's always good to have a plan B. Betsy and I both mentioned this earlier. If you get to a parking lot and it's totally full, there's no room for you, have a plan B option, like have a different parking area that you could go to and find some fun skiing. Also on the other side of that is weather changes really quickly. So you want to be able to have a plan B in case the avalanche hazard is suddenly going up. There are a lot of people out there. Let's be nice to others. I think it's as simple as that, right? Similar to what Betsy and I did in Turkey Shoot, right? When Betsy was skiing, I was not standing right in the middle of the chute. And that's for safety reasons. It's the same no matter where we go. So if someone is skiing below you, wait for them to completely get out of the way before you start skiing. Road cuts are essentially the really steep zones right next to the road that have been bombed in order to build a road or a mountain pass, such as Teton Pass. The problem with these areas is they often avalanche because they're steep and because on Teton Pass specifically, they face the sun. So they get a ton of solar effect. And when we ski them, not only are we putting ourselves at risk, but also we're putting the cars at risk that are driving by. So please do not ski road cuts. So just know the area, know what areas are being closed for wildlife reasons, and also what areas are being closed because maybe there's a road cut below the sign, or maybe there's a cliff. There is a good reason if there's a sign, so just respect those. The organization that's putting all of this information out there is Teton Backcountry Alliance. We feel really lucky to be able to have an organization such as them. They're doing so much amazing work for us. So if you have any questions or you want more information, you can go to tetonbackcountryalliance.org. And the final thing that I'm going to mention, I don't want to lecture you all on backcountry etiquette, but I do think it's just important to consider this stuff, is après hangouts, right? It looks a lot different this year and last year because of COVID-19.
Now I'm going to talk a little bit about our deep powder camp that Rebecca and I are going to be teaching. So the camp is being put on by the Mountain Guides, the company that Rebecca and I both work with. It's also being supported by DPS Skis. They're going to have free rentals of their new pagoda model available for anyone who wants to join us. And then 57 Hours is helping us promote it, as well as Backcountry Magazine. So it's an all-women's deep powder camp in the Tetons. You'll have to travel to Jackson Hole to participate if you don't already live here. And I'm just going to kind of run through what a day on a deep powder camp will look like. So obviously the first thing we're going to do is meet in the parking lot in the morning. This was a dawn patrol that I did on Teton Pass. We probably won't meet this early. We'll probably meet when it's light out. But we'll put our boots on, get our gear ready, check each other's gear to make sure everyone has everything. And then before we leave the parking lot, we'll talk about conditions, we'll talk about our trip plan, and we'll just make sure that we're all on the same page. And then, like we said, DPS will be providing free rentals. The gray ski that's here in the middle is their new pagoda line that they just came out with this year. So if you want to try that out, you'll be able to. So yeah, if you don't have your own powder skis, we can help you out there. And then we will start skinning. In backcountry skiing, a lot of the day is spent walking uphill, but it is pretty cool being Grand Teton National Park where you have beautiful views and you can really enjoy the hike. This was actually on a deep powder camp that I taught last year. We're getting to the top of Shadow Peak. It was a pretty deep day, which was awesome. We'll also be talking about skinning technique, both how to set a skin track, how to decide where to go up, and then giving some tips for skinning efficiency. This is one of our splitboard guides, Izzy, who was in some of the turkey shoot photos. She was teaching a splitboarding clinic last year. And splitboarders are welcome, though Rebecca and I are both skiers. We're happy to give some tips to splitboarders on skinning. And then we'll also talk about transitioning. Again, this is Izzy teaching transitioning on a clinic on Teton Pass. We'll just give some tips on how to do it efficiently, how to do it quickly, how to not let all of your stuff get wet in the snow, those kinds of things. And then before we drop in, we're going to talk about line selection. So this is me guiding on Teton Pass a couple of years ago, talking about dropping into this big, huge open bowl. We didn't end up skiing it because we didn't think it was safe. We ended up skiing a ridge instead. But part of the Deep Pow Camp is talking through that decision making and giving you some tools to decide whether or not it's a good time to ski something, a good time to bail on something, and then also how to find really good snow. We're also going to talk about with the safety realm, like how to avoid avalanche terrain when needed. This is one of our guides from Montana, Sue, measuring the slope angle to figure out if the area that she's in is avalanche terrain. Generally, if something's around 30 degrees or higher, that is avalanche terrain that has the potential to slide. And another thing Sue's doing is she's digging a snow pit. We might not dig a full snow pit on the deep powder camp, but we will definitely talk about snowpack and how to assess the snow, both to make sure it's safe and also to make sure that we're finding the best snow possible. And then we're going to ski powder. So this is me skiing on Teton Pass. It was a pretty awesome deep day out on the pass. Some things we'll talk about is on top of finding the best snow, how to ski the best snow. So if you're used to skiing on the East Coast and you ski a lot of ice, we'll give you some techniques to enjoy powder skiing, how to get some face shots and make the most out of your powder turns. And ideally, it would look like this on our deep powder camp. Like Rebecca said, it's not always dumping here, but we can usually find some decent snow. This was definitely a deeper day. So you can see that guy is like buried under snow. And this is a video from a deep POW camp that I taught last year where it was like probably we lucked out with the snow. It was probably the deepest day that I've ever skied. It was ridiculous. So here's the video. So it was still snowing also while we were skiing. This was the first day of the camp. And I just dumped all day. So yeah, it was pretty deep. It was an awesome day. It was like almost too deep, the snow. When it was flat, it was hard to move in. This is another photo from the second day of that deep POW camp I taught last year. It was not as deep as the first day because the sun came out, but overnight it kept snowing. So all of the tracks had been refreshed. We got fresh turns all day on the second day too. Here we're just stopping to catch our breath and laugh about how good the skiing was, brush some of the snow off us. And then these are two of Rebecca's clients that she guided recently, just having an awesome time skinning up. So yeah, it'll be Rebecca and I guiding. Here's Rebecca setting a skin track just north of the Tetons. And yeah, we'd love to have you join us. We have 6 spots still available. We are going to be COVID conscious, so everyone will be asked to wear a mask and we'll make sure we're social distancing. The trip starts on March 13th and goes into the 14th. And it's open to probably intermediate to advanced ski abilities, but you don't need to have had backcountry experience before. We can teach you that. Cool. And then we will have 2 guides, so we can always divide up the group if there needs to be an intermediate and an advanced group.
I think the last thing I would say is backcountry skiing is amazing. And if you're interested, like Betsy and I are always happy to take out new people. But yeah, like everyone stay safe out there.